Hi, everybody. Hi. Hang tight 1 second. Just putting something in the chat here. Okay. Hi, Joe. Okay, let me do this. Gina, dee, dee, dee. Being here. Nice to see you all for a little lunchtime live. I'm going to have my guests getting in here any second, and we're going to talk a little bit about, I don't know, something a little different that I thought might be helpful. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much. I'll give you details on all that stuff later. I'm just going to wait for Gina to come in, and then we'll be all good to go. Hope you're all doing well. Happy hump day. There she is. Perfect. Okay, let's see. Here she comes. Here she comes. I think she's coming. Hold on. Let's try this again. The miracles of modern technology. Unable to join. All right, strange. Let me try another way, Gina. Let's try this. See if that works. Just an invite. There she goes. There she is.
Oh my goodness. It was touch and go for a minute.
It's not, it's not alive unless it's a nail biter.
It's so true. I love the suspense. It's been a long time since I've done a live, so I love it.
Good.
Hi,
well, thank you for being here. I want to introduce Gina Moffa to all of my followers. If you've been following me for a while, I have mentioned someone who's been very helpful for me as I've processed my own grief and loss. And this is my now friend, Gina. Gina and I became like Insta friends first, and then has become a true friend. So I want you to just introduce yourself, tell everyone about you, and go for it.
I love it. And I love watching you grow also. So being on the sidelines, just watching your friend rise and soar, there's nothing better. So congratulations, friend.
Thank you, babe.
Hi, everybody. Being here with Jen's crowd is such a gift to me because I get to watch the enthusiasm from all of you all the time, and the cheering and the learning and the camaraderie and the community. And so it's so wonderful. And it's wonderful to be here. My name is Gina Moffa. I am a grief and trauma therapist with a private practice in New York City. And I just wrote a book that is coming out next week on navigating loss. And really, it is sort of a modern guide these days because life post-pandemic, I know we're still in COVID times, but life has changed. It feels like everything is so much faster and everything feels so much more uncertain than it ever has before. So it felt important to me to try to help the people along. Loss is just so prevalent everywhere in so many different types of ways. So yeah, it's coming so soon.
I know. For those of you who follow me, I have linked Gina's book in my stories. And so you can pre-order your copy there, and it's also in my Amazon store. So if you go to stories and it's not there anymore, if you tap on the little Amazon bubble at the top of my Instagram, it's in the books section, available for pre-order and launching next week.
Next week.
So
you have to sing it. There's no way to say things. So yeah. So thank you.
Yeah. And I think, I want to, it's a heavy conversation, obviously. I think a lot of us have dealt with grief in one shape or form of another. And I think so many times people associate grief only with death. And in my conversations with you post, the dissolution of my 13-year relationship, there was a whole conversation around, Jen, this is also a form of grief. Relationship grief is a form of grief. And I think sometimes people don't consider that. They always think it's not, like they can't have those big feelings around anything other than really losing someone completely.
Absolutely. And I mean, look, this is part of grief literacy, right? Where were we taught that you can grieve things that weren't death related? But if you think about it, every single person here on this call with us, and really, I would actually say that pretty much everyone, who's an adult at this point or even less than, has experienced some sort of loss. Loss itself is a natural response to an event that feels significant to us, or a loss that feels significant to us. That can disrupt our sense of normalcy. It's a loss of a connection that defines us.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a job, that can be a friendship, that can be a spouse or a partner in any type of way. That can be an event that you thought you would be going to, but that you saved up for, or a job that you thought you would have. It's really anything that feels significant to us and has meaning to us. And it is so far beyond death. And I mean, it's just important for people to know that we respect death, of course, but because it is so much more common for people to experience other losses in their lives, it's really important for me to say, look, let's understand this at the time so we can give ourselves what we need.
Yeah. Yeah. I had an interesting conversation yesterday. I was with a friend and we were talking, and she's a mother. I am not, but she was talking to another mother, recent, new mother. And she said, how's your motherhood experience been? She said, I'm grieving the loss of what I thought motherhood was going to be.
Yeah.
I think
Totally.
it's important, like those things of, these expectations that we attach to people, to events, to, future dreams, expectations that people have of children, that they, your children take a different path, and you kind of grieve that piece of it. It's when you and I have spoken, it's been, around the grief of what I thought my marriage was going to look like, and what I thought my life was going to look like with this person involved as a permanent part of it. And you grieve that piece. And I think, you and I had talked, and you were so helpful for me in the weeks after all this kind of shook out for me. And it was just that thought of like, hey, it's okay to grieve what you thought this was going to be. Like, you thought this was going to be one thing, and it's not been that thing. And there's a grief associated with it.
Yeah. And even the grief of thinking that somebody that we love in our lives will always be there or will be a certain way with us.
Yep.
The change in relationship dynamics. It's like people change and they forget to tell each other. That happens so much more often than we can even say, and not to bring up more of your losses, but you had just come off of a very, very deep and dear loss to you a year earlier during COVID. So, I mean, this grief was already still in you, and now you're contending with yet another loss. And I think this is also real life, where we have multiple losses and we don't actually understand the snowball effect of that too.
Yeah. And I think, it was when you brought that up, I was like, wow, I hadn't even considered that. And then I think too, it was also on the heels of walking away from my, my big corporate job life, which I did voluntarily. But at the same time, there is a set of feelings around that too, of like, hey, that was a chapter of my life that's coming to an end, or relationships that I had at those jobs where I felt, I'm losing those connections. And so there's a lot of pieces and parts to it.
Yeah. And I think I mentioned this to you at some point too, that positive losses can also bring grief. I mean, changes that we choose doesn't mean it comes with nothing but, smooth sailing and joy ahead. I mean, things are bumpy and there is still a loss. So, I mean, you lose that sense of camaraderie. I'm using that twice now today, but, with your colleagues, and especially you, because you're somebody who shows up, you're fully present. And so you lose that sense of people to talk to every day. And now, you have us to talk to every day, but, we're not talking back that well. So, but it is. And I think we forget that life, to live is to grieve in a way, right? Because there's so many different things that pop up that do challenge and disrupt our sense of normalcy. And I'm not being dramatic or creating a buzzword around it, but I think because grief has been so stigmatized, and it's something that Western society just like taps their watch at all the time, and they're like, are you done yet? Can we get back to normal? We've got shit to do. Like, this isn't something that we can stretch out for too long. That I think that we need to sort of swing the pendulum in the other direction and say, wait a minute, these losses that I'm experiencing are important. And yes, it may at times feel like a luxury to grieve because we have to get back to work, or we're caretakers, or we have urgent matters to get back to. But it is really important that we stop for a minute and actually acknowledge the loss and how it affects us, because grief is a full body experience. It will show up. It will show up whether or not you want it to, in some form or another. So it's, how do we take the time to actually just acknowledge what's happening? And this is across the board. You know, I'm working with people who have losses of all kinds, and friendship loss is a really big one lately. You know, chronic illness diagnoses, people don't acknowledge those as much because you're still alive.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is a really big change. And the people who are coming to me and the people that I'm now relating to are relating to me differently. So there's so much change in that. And I just really wanted to bring grief, the word grief, I want to take the buzz out of it, you know, and just say, this is something that every single human on this planet will experience in one form or another at some point in their life. We better get better at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, I remember one of the things you and I had talked about when I was talking about my, you know, impending divorce and the breakup. You said, you know, the toughest part sometimes is when you're grieving someone who's still alive. And, you know, and I think sometimes that's the, you know, I think there's the set of grief that comes with losing someone. And of course, you know, all of the dynamics of what that relationship was like prior to losing them, whether they were wonderful or whether there are things left unsaid and you have those things that you're holding on to.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, the other thing that you had said that was really profound for me in the moment was, it's very difficult when you're grieving someone who's still in the room. And it was that feeling for me. I mean, there was that feeling of, we were still living together for a while, and I was going through and processing all of these emotions while this person's still standing in my kitchen. And I'm like, it's Sunday morning and we're eating breakfast and I'm grieving the loss of you, and you're in the room.
Yeah. And he had already done that.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the part that's the most nerve-wracking of all of it, and crazy making in a way, because that's what I mean, right? Like, people forget to tell each other when they are shifting and when they're changing. And I think you had to go through that much faster.
Yeah.
You know, however long it took him to think that this was the choice or whatever it is. And you had to just quickly say, all right, so I'm now, not only I'm just getting this information, and do I have to process this information, but now I have to figure out the pragmatic things of my life.
Yeah.
I have to totally rebuild my life in this new foreign landscape that we had not planned for. And so, I mean, I think that's the hardest part of certain types of grief, is that it can be really mixed up with that anger and that shock and that disbelief and that sadness and that regret and that sort of saying, all right, well, how do we renegotiate this in some way? Is this true? Can we work on this? Is this the end? And I think that pulling out of that is really one of the more painful parts.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was with you in it, feeling it with you, you know?
Yeah.
Just and that sense of like,
that was really helpful for me, because to your point, I think, you know, sometimes, like you said, people don't kind of clue you in, and then you're smacked with this news and you go, holy shit, like, I didn't see this coming. And then to your point, I have all of these other things that I also have to, it'd be hard enough to just lose someone and have everything else stay the same. But now I have to also think about, what does this life look like now that I'm going to be living alone, and where am I going to live, and what's my job going to be now because I just quit my job. And there were so many things that play for me in that moment. And then to have someone who seemed to be so resolved in their decision when it seemed so fresh and new to me was hard to reconcile. It was hard to kind of move through that in the very beginning.
Yeah. And you know, we spend a lot of time ruminating. You know, like, where did I miss something? What could I have done differently? How could I have responded differently? And, you know, that's all a part of the grieving process too, is sort of that replaying and retracing our steps, whether it's our own, you know, guilt or our own sense of like, how did I not see this coming? Or, you know, anything we can do to try to make sense and have some sense of control over something that is mind-blowingly shocking to us at a time. And that's all part of that grief process. Is really kind of like looking back and saying, like, where did this was it like this from the beginning? What didn't I see?
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. You know, and also, you know, you you were doing a lot of tango. So, you know, we do that.
Nice way to put it. I like to call it the WTF shuffle, but you've been so much more romantic when you said tango.
Tango. You were dancing in my mind very very gracefully, you know,
Yeah.
and still showing up, you know, when I know all of us would have given you permission to do a live from your bed and have some pillow talk, you know,
Yep.
and you really still showed up. So you know, it just shows your strength in all of that. And also that, you know, grieving can be that sense of luxury. Like I said, like we still have shit to do, and it's still really important. We still sometimes have to show up, and that's so hard.
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned something earlier that I also think was very profound. It's that the time to grieve, you know, I mean, like, you know, if this happens and we're working, we have bereavement leave, and and the bereavement leave is dependent on what the value was of that person in your life. Like if it's a parent, it's longer, but if it was just a friend, it's a this, or like, you know,
it's still not long enough.
Putting kind of like a monetary label on what the grief was worth depending on the relationship is crazy to me. But also I think, you know, I'm hearing a lot of it now because I feel like I've turned some corners fairly quickly in my processing of all of this, that there is that thing of like, I've heard this, you know, on more than one occasion, wow, you've really bounced back so fast. You know, yes, my relationship was 13 years long. And then there's this feeling of, wow, you're really bounced back, like really as if I haven't taken enough time or that. And I think I would love to hear your conversation around just the time piece of it, because I think there's that thing of, I'll give you an example. You mentioned I lost a really good friend a couple of years ago to COVID unexpectedly. She was gone within a week. She was 46. I mean, one day she had a cold and the next day she was dead. And there was this feeling of like, you know, I thought about her spouse and thought, you know, how long is enough time for everyone to think that he's grieved enough to be able to move on with his life? You know, or we see these things like, oh, well, they were married for 25 years. I can't believe he's dating already. Or that this happened. And this thing of putting a timeline and an expectation on what that looks like. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that we don't know what we don't know, right?
Yeah.
So I also feel like we're seeing something on the outside. I would beg to differ that he's done grieving. Just the same as you have bounced back quickly. Grief doesn't work like that.
Right.
There's just no, you know, that, like I said, we're not tapping our watches. And just because somebody makes a decision to move forward in some way doesn't mean that they're not grieving. It doesn't mean that things won't come up. It doesn't mean that they don't desperately and ferociously miss their person.
Yeah.
It means that they're allowing life back in as well. And one of the things that, you know, we don't talk enough about is really how to live both of those lanes at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, yes, people can say you bounced back. Yes, I'm happy to see your eyes shine again. I know I told you there was one day I didn't see that shine. Yeah. But I don't think you're done, quote unquote, grieving. This is, you're just living as well. Yeah. And we don't always grieve out loud. They're quiet moments. It's those mundane moments where something pops up. It's a smell. It's something in our senses. It's a memory. It's the way, you know, your dog looks out the window longingly, like whatever it may be. Yeah. And that's a personal, private moment to us. It doesn't mean that we have to forecast it to the entire world. But it doesn't mean just because we look or seem happy or we seem fine and okay that we are. Grief is with us, by our side, our steadfast companion, you know, and it just is, and it changes shape, and hopefully it lessens in intensity in some days, you know, at some points. But, you know, anniversaries, milestones, or just regular ordinary moments, we are so quick to judge people, and we're so quick to categorize them as not okay and okay. And, you know, look, the workplace does that. You know, I think I saw my friend Barry here in the comments saying we need universal bereavement leave policy. Yes, times a million. Yes, you know, like how many clients do I have that come in that are mourning the loss of a dear friend? Also, they're closer with their best friend than they are their parent. you know, and so why should that get less because it's not somebody they're blood related to? And, you know, we need a whole overhaul, I say, of the way that we look at grief in this country, the way that we acknowledge loss with each other, the way we show up for each other, these hollow platitudes of like, well, heaven gained another angel, which is something I heard from a friend of mine and a dear friend who just posted it on Facebook and even misspelled angel. And so, you know, like, you couldn't even take a moment to check your spelling.
Yeah.
So now heaven got another angle. Well, I mean, yeah, that's true too. You know?
Yeah.
So it's sort of like we're so quick to sort of like be fast when it comes to grief and categorize and judge. And I just want us to take a beat.
Yeah.
People who lose something significant do not just get over it if it is very, very significant and disrupts their entire sense of self. It just doesn't work like that, you know? And so if they're okay, yeah, celebrate that being okay with them in the moment, but also bring up their loss from time to time, because the truth is that it's not like they've forgotten about it. You know, if I said to you, which I think I did last week, like, hey, like checking in, that's usually my MO with you, like, hey, period, checking in, period. Yep. That's my way of saying, hey, how's your grief? How's your heart? How's your soul? Not, you know, and there's permission there for you to say, I'm having a shit day and, you know, I'm really missing so-and-so and like, or I'm feeling lonely today, or I'm feeling scared of the future. Great. Let's talk about it. I'm here. I just want you to know that. And it doesn't have to be that you also could be on Instagram later looking fly and like, you know, it's all there. And I think I just want that more than anything, for people to have the permission to grieve, and also the permission to still have that grief while they're living and looking good and attending events and going to parties also. Yeah. So that's sort of my mission.
Yeah. Well, I think there, you know, in that comes that conversation around vulnerability and our ability to be vulnerable, and who we feel safe to be vulnerable with, and all of those, you know, intense dynamics, I think, because as you're processing loss in any capacity, I mean, when your pet dies and you have to go to work the next day because no one gives you any for that, even though that's a profound loss. You know, if you're a pet person, you know, it's the same kind of thing. It's a long relationship. It's a long thing. It's loving someone for a very long time and then losing them. And there's this, but I think there is that vulnerability component of being able to speak about it and be honest about it and feel free to be about it. I learned this lesson just recently. I shared the story the other day. I went to this like women's networking group for the very first time and met this woman, first time meeting her. And she had moved from New York to the DC area. And I was like, oh, what brought you here? And she said, I lost my husband unexpectedly. She's like my age. She's like, I lost my husband unexpectedly, he passed away. And, you know, and all the women, like you kind of saw everybody just shuffle, right? Because you don't, and I want to get your thoughts on this after I say the story, but you could feel like that discomfort of like, oh shit, this is awful. And like, how do you?
I lost you. Oh, you're back. Yeah.
To something like this that's so awful. And I saw everybody kind of, and I just looked at her and I was listening to her and I was like, oh, like, I'm so sorry that happened. You know, I said, I feel for you. I'm like, tell me about him. And she was like, and she said, oh, and she started to speak about him. I was like, what was your favorite thing about him? Like, what was your favorite thing that you loved about him? And she's like, oh, he was this and that. She shared some of his qualities and kind of left it at that. And, you know, other people came into the conversation. So the conversation shifted and I exchanged numbers with a few of them. And I got a text from her a couple hours later saying, I want you to know how much I appreciated your thoughtful question about my husband. Oftentimes when I say that he died, everyone immediately changes the subject. And she said it was so nice to speak about him and to speak those memories, you know, into existence again. And it was such a lesson for me because I too have been there, and I would love to know your take. We talk a lot about allyship, right? And how to show up as a good friend or a good support system. And I think there is that feeling of, I went through it with my best friend. She's been battling cancer for a handful of years. And I told her, I said, I'm doing emotional double dutch here. To your point, like I'm checking in, Like, if you need to call me and scream your ass off and be freaking mad at the world, like, I'm here. But if you're having a good day, I don't want to F it up by saying, how's your thing? How you doing with your cancer? You know, so there's that, you know, what's your advice in those situations?
I think, you know, and there may be two of them, but I think, you know, what I want to say, if it's a friend, you know, we often don't show up anymore as us. And when somebody's going through something really disorienting, right? Like a major loss, it's like you've been picked up and transported to this other universe. And now the universe there is like, great, go about your life now. And everything is foreign and you have no map. And so the last thing you want are the people in your life to not be the people in your life being the people in your life, right? So, you know, when my mom died, it was people coming up to me saying really weird things or reciting a quote. And I'm like, you don't speak like that. Who are you? You know, that's not, where's my friends?
Yeah.
Like, why are people body snatchers right now? I just want my people to be my people because I don't know where I am right now. So I need something familiar.
Yeah.
And so when we walk on, you know, eggshells around people who have gone through loss, and I understand the instinct to do it because we weren't taught to do better. But when we do that, what we're really doing is further isolating them and alienating them from what they need the most, which is intimate and authentic connection. Yes. And so that, to me, it's like if you have a friend going through something, it almost, you're not going to not remind her of her cancer. You know what I mean? You're not going to, like, you're not, she's living with it every day. It's that tab in the background, whether you've had a loss or you're dealing with illness, it's there. You think about it every day. And yes, is it nice to have a distraction? But if you're my close friend, I'll be like, shut up, I'm having a good day. Or, you know what I mean? Because that is what we need. We need people who will acknowledge what we've gone through and check in and not stop checking in. You know what I mean? I think for me, you know, after, I'm talking about my own loss too still here, but I think there was maybe a 3-month period where people stopped asking, you know, stopped even acknowledging that I had a loss at all. And, you know, I was a grief therapist at the time of my loss, failing miserably at my own loss because I thought I was exempt from my grief class. But, you know, I think at the time I personally needed my people to be my people. And so doing that double dutch is so hard, but so common because people are afraid and they don't want to upset people and they don't want to remind them. But girl, they are being reminded every day, you know. And, you know, as for the woman at the networking group, it's like, I'm sure that she, you know, just that sense of somebody saying, because she didn't expect it, that you're a real person and like you're here because you probably want to connect and have connections again, but this is still a part of your life. So, you know, I'm grateful that that went as well as it did. And thank you for being that person because that is who you are, you know. And
well,
it is, you know,
it's the first time I had done that. You know, because I have also been in those, and to your point, like sometimes we just don't have the tools and, you know, you get hit with something unexpected and you go, oh, and you just don't, you knee jerk. And I was like, God, as the question came out of my mouth, I thought, God, is this the thing to be asking her in a room full of people that she doesn't know? I'm just meeting her. Like, does she, you know, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to, like, that's awful. But like, what made him special? And it was, and she just lit up. Like she went, oh, he was this and that. And it was lovely to see her speak about him. And I feel that when I recount stories with our mutual friend of my friend that I lost, and they had been friends since they were children, babies, and grew up together. And to hear her stories about our friend and to share our mutual stories with our friend, it keeps her alive in our spirit. And it's been fun to talk about her. And sure, it has those bittersweet feelings of, gosh, I miss her. But at the same time, it's to your point, like sometimes people just stop asking. Like someone loses someone and you go, all right, well, it's been a handful of months. And like, okay, well, that didn't end. You know, like,
or they disappear totally. I mean, how many people do you just never hear from again because they don't know what to say? And I don't blame them, right? People have good intentions. People care. but we haven't been given the tools to know how to help. And I think part of what I'm loving right now about Hollywood bringing grief into the mix, you know, almost every show that's out right now has grief in it, even the Barbie movie.
Yeah.
And what I love about that is that we're just talking about it more. So maybe we can start to say, I don't know what to do for you, but just know that I care. I'm so awkward. This is awkward, but I'm here. Or, hey, like, how about I come over and cook dinner tonight? Or how about I drop something off and I'll leave it outside of your door? You know, what can I help you with tangibly? Like, you know, if you know them really well, you know, doing something physically for somebody. I always say dropping off food, but, you know, we don't need the casserole dish itself. But if we don't know what to do, just showing up. And what I love about how you went with the lady, or I was going to say confronted, but it's not the right word, but is that you actually talked about something positive, right? Because I remember hearing something similar and the person responded to that news by saying, well, how did he die? Oh, that's terrible. How did he die?
Yeah.
And that's not the question to ask. What was special about him? What was great? Those are good things because that's a safe question.
Yeah.
But when we ask something that reminds them of something that feels traumatic to them or fresh, I mean, we're basically saying like we're putting them in a really unsafe place. And I mean, that's the clinical Gina coming out, wanting everyone to feel safe enough to talk about stuff. But do that all the live long day, because that is loving, caring, and you're, you know, if people can look at you, they can see that you're safe. But yeah, I mean, I think that people, like I said, people have good intentions. I think it's just, we have to be better at taking risks and saying, I don't know what to say to you, but I love you and I'm here, and checking in. And if all you ever do is check in and listen, that's more than half the battle. It really is. If you could do something tangibly, even better. You know, but look, the bare minimum in my account is just show up as you.
And I think it's the vulnerability on both sides. You know, when my friend was diagnosed, you know, in the beginning I was just wrecked because I was like, this is my person, like this is my sister, and you know, I had my own feelings of like, oh my God, what if something happens in this life without her, and how, you know, I thought about myself. Of course I thought about her, but I also thought about myself and her daughter, all of those things. But I think to your point, I think it sometimes takes vulnerability on both sides. And I did go to her at one point and said, listen, I don't know exactly how to do this with you, but I'm just going to say this, like, if you want to go break plates and throw axes, I'm there. If you want to go to a mountain and scream your ass off, I'm there. You want to lay in my lap and eat Oreos and cry, I'm there. Like, if you want to go out and get massages and giggle and you know, be stupid and go to a costume shop and go try on wigs, I'm there. Like, whatever you need me to do, that's what I want to be for you. But I won't always know what the right thing is to say, but know that my intentions are always to just support you and what you need from me in that moment. So just please ask me, you know, if I'm not giving it to you, because there is this feeling of like, how do I approach this? This is the first friend I've had that's going through a really terrible illness. And how do I deal with this? Like, I don't know. This is new for me.
Yeah. And it's new for her too, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you know, and something I say too is, or talk about in my book also, is that we don't, as grievers or as somebody going through a major change or, you know, really big challenge, we don't know what we need either. And so when you say, you know, I don't know what you need, just let me know. It's like, oh, I don't know what I need either. I just know that I need something. And, you know, we may need to be alone, you know, or then we need to be around people. Then we may need to be alone again and then around people. You know, and it's really hard sometimes to gauge what people need when they need it, because they don't know what they need all the time. So sometimes I'm kind of like, let's have 3 categories. I'm coming over with cookies. We're going to a movie, or we're going shopping, or for coffee, or whatever it may be, or, you know, we're going to go break things. You know, if you know that person, and then check in and say, hey, this week, category 1, 2, or 3.
That's great.
You know, and go from there, because I think, you know, it is one of those things that where two people can fall into a trap, because it's the good intentions are there always, you know, the love is there, the connection is there, but it almost is like, ooh, if I don't know what I need and you don't know what I need, then where do we go from here? And
Yeah.
so it is hard. It is, and you know, hopefully people do get to learn what their needs are, but especially in like the beginning of losses of any kind, it's like life is different and I don't know what's going on. I just want to feel normal again
Yeah.
in some way, or better, you know, whatever it is, and I don't know how. But you know, having that tangible thing or giving options specifically can be really helpful
Yeah.
to somebody going through that.
That's a really great way to put it, because it's, you know, you don't know how to define that support and you don't know necessarily what to say. And I like what you just said. I mean, there were moments when I didn't hear from her for weeks, you know, and I was like, this has got to be part of what she's going through. Like, she's got all these, to your point, pragmatic things to think about. She's got a child and a thing. And so I would just message her like, hey, I know you're out on an island. I'm here waiting on you. Love you. Like, whenever you need me, like, but
Yeah.
it was like, I knew I needed to give her space, because I think there is that thing too that we do when you're trying to be a support, is you're trying to think about how you would reach out or what you would do in their situation, which you don't really know for sure. And then that feeling of like, I can't let it hurt my feelings that I haven't heard from her in weeks. And I'm sitting here like, how can I help you, support you, and you're not reaching out to me? It's like, I see that she's going to need time, and I just need her to know that I'm here.
Yeah.
Like, when she comes up for air, like, I'm here. Like, and to your point, just the check-in, like, I love you, I'm here. And that went on for like weeks and weeks and not a response. And then I would circumvent, go to her family. How's she doing? Have you talked to her? Because I was like, I just need to know she's okay, just for my own peace of mind. But there's that, again, the dancing.
It is. I call it like I'm using the word tango again, but it's like the delicate tango that you're doing with people, because you don't know, when are they going to dip?
Yeah.
When are we going to do that abrupt turn? You know, I don't know. But, you know, the idea is like, when in doubt, if there's something tangible you can do, something tangible you can bring, do it. When, you know, or, you know, just do it, keep doing that check-in, you know.
Yeah.
I think people run out of ideas because they don't want to do the wrong thing. And, you know, when you love someone and when you care, just be you. That care will come across. You know, there's a lot of pressure to do the right thing. And I know we talk about tips and all of that stuff, but the truth is love, you know, and love can be felt when we're in a dark void and, you know, the sticky tar pit of loss. You know, we just want that hand to pull us out, and we don't always know, you know, we don't need to be pulled out and like hosed down. Just, you know, just give us that hand.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tough, but you know, the point of doing this and having you do this with me, thank you today, is really just to help people show up better for themselves and others, and to destigmatize something that I think people find so much discomfort in. And then there's so much judgment and self-judgment and lack of compassion and lack of self-compassion and compassion. And then we sit in shame. Like, why do I still feel bad? You know, what's wrong with me? Am I stuck? And the answer is no, all around. Like, this is grief. We just don't educate enough about it. And it can be really isolating. So, you know, when in doubt, you know, reach out, and just don't think that you have to go through this alone all the time. Solitude is good. Isolation is not.
Yes.
And it's easy to isolate. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's, you know, the concept around, and two, I think there's that feeling of, why can't I get through this? Especially if it's like you're grieving someone who was a jerk, or you're grieving someone that you had a very complicated relationship with. You know, and if it's a parent that didn't give you what you needed as a child, and then they pass, and you have all these unresolved feelings, and you're grieving that person, but everyone's like, why are you grieving them? They were an asshole. Like, but there's still all of those things. You're grieving the potential of what you thought it could be, or the vision of what you hoped it could wind up being, or where you hope you might wind up getting to before they passed away, or before they walked out of life. And
we do. It's a far more common, I think it's a far more common experience to grieve things that we wish we had, and to grieve things we never had. We just don't bring that to our consciousness a lot. And, you know, but that is a really common experience. If you think of your life, you know, all the things you wish that you had, relationships that you wished would be better or hoped would be better that just couldn't be, you know, whether or not it's a death or an estrangement or whatever it is. You know, estrangements are things we don't get condolence cards for estrangements. You know, we don't get the casserole dish and the calls of concern so much, you know, and it's just that's just as deep a loss, you know, and the loss of what could never be. And, you know, and that's a much more common loss that we each face at some point in our lives with somebody, because people are clumsy humans and it's tough, you know, but it is. And just understanding all of these different types of losses and the ways that we can acknowledge them. I mean, that's the step towards healing, right? We don't heal on an island. We heal in connection, and just having that sort of tenderness in witnessing somebody's struggle and caring and being present. I mean, to me, yeah, I am a therapist who has a lot of training in different things, but one of the things I think is the most important is the relationship that I have with somebody in my office. And that alone, you know, that sense of tenderness and being present, and that to me is the most powerful thing, is connection.
Yeah.
So
I think that bears repeating. That's why if you saw me, I was writing it down. So we don't heal on an island. You know, I think that's so powerful, because I think there is that thing of, you and I talked about this in my own experience with everything I've been going through. It is that feeling of sometimes when you're independent and you're seen as strong, you know, one of the things, I think one of the adjectives that comes up a lot with me, with people who have known me for a long time, is, oh, you're so strong. And, you know, I think there's a self-imposed, if I'm being vulnerable, a self-imposed feeling from time to time that I need to present like I'm okay. And I have become very okay in the last handful of years with not being okay, and telling people like, hey, you know what, I'm paddling like a motherfucker right now.
yeah.
Like, it looks like, you know, I'm like a duck. I'm on the surface, I look really good. Underneath, I'm like this, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think there's that thing sometimes of breaking down those walls of strength and being able to say, you know what, yeah, it looks good. I'm not always great. Like I'm not always great. And I was great yesterday. Today I'm shit. Tomorrow I'm hoping to be better. But it's this highs and lows that comes with it. And there is times that feeling of, when you are an independent person, and when you are used to doing things for yourself and by yourself, and there can be that tendency to kind of island up and wall up and get very insular.
Yep.
And you made such a good point to me when we were talking in the beginning, like, you know, those healing things happen in the healing that needs to happen happens inside of connection. It doesn't happen, you won't heal that shit on your own. And it's the reaching out to the people, it's the saying I'm not okay, it's the receiving of love, it's the receiving of support that helps you get through some of it.
Yeah.
Because none of us have all the tools.
100%. Most of us don't have any tools.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, the tools don't mean anything if you're alone. They just don't, you know. And when you are vulnerable, you give other people permission to love you differently and to show up differently. And you give them permission to be vulnerable. And therein lies so much healing, you know. And the truth is like, you know, women specifically, there's so much more pressure. I can't say men don't experience this. They experience it in different ways emotionally. But for women, to be independent is a good thing, and to be ultra strong is so amazing and like good for you. And this intergenerational epigenetic traumas that, you know, are passed down, it doesn't give us permission to be human anymore. And to have our sense of, you know, I use the word tenderness because, you know, tenderness then is weak. And, you know, in a way, for us to be more feminist and strong, you know, we're taking on a lot of masculine traits, and the masculine, we're trying to, you know, we're trying to make them softer, but we have to do it too, you know. And that really comes with that vulnerability. And I don't say this without first knowing that we have to feel safe in order to be vulnerable. So, you know, the most important thing is to have safe people around you in one form or another, friendships or family or a good therapist or a coach or support, whatever it is, that we really do need that safety. And I'm glad that you have that, because that is really the way that we start. That is the way towards healing. Safe connection.
Yeah.
If I were to have two words that would equal healing, it would be safe connections.
Yeah.
you know, so it's hard, but there's a way through it. And it isn't through just being strong and being independent, and it isn't through isolation and just pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. It's being very tender with yourself, compassionate with yourself, reaching out when you need to, accepting help when you need it. You know, we're so quick to offer help, but accepting it is hard for a lot of
Mhm.
people. Receiving is really, really hard. And, you know, to give ourselves permission to receive when we're at a low point in our life is really, really courageous. I wish it wasn't, you know, but
Mhm.
we need to keep doing that for ourselves, and really to show up and give ourselves that allowance to be in whatever state we are in the moment, and to not judge it, you know, to you know, to change our expectations of ourselves when we're in a really dark place. And that means how we show up with our beauty and our self-care and all of that stuff, you know, is like drop the knife to our throat already and just
Right.
allow ourselves to be what we are in this moment, messy and vulnerable and scared and uncertain. And that, you know, and to reach out to whatever tethering we can in that place, because that is what saves us.
Yeah. And I think your point bears to be repeating too, that, you know, the vulnerability gives the other people the space to also be vulnerable with you,
Yeah.
you know, and that's a lesson that I've learned deeply with my best friend who reminded me of that years ago at the beginning of our friendship. You know, I was expressing some vulnerability with previous relationship, and she was like, you know what, I always thought that you had it all together. Like, it's always been so, like, I see you and you know, you're always presenting, and you're, you know, you've always got your shit together. You look good. You're smiling. You seem happy, all of those things. Just like, but I don't, I never thought that you were messy. And just like the fact that you just expressed to me that you don't feel strong all the time, you don't feel like you got it together all the time, that you feel messy sometimes, that you feel like you can't figure it out on your own. She's like, that just took our friendship to a whole other level. And it was such a lesson. I never forgot the conversation. And it sticks with me to this day. And that's why she's my best and dearest friend, is just this ability to just say to me, you know what, like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to be that person. Like, here's my safe space. And honestly, when you show me that you're broken, I feel okay to be broken too. And, you know, that expression, we're all just walking each other home. You know, it's just, it's my flaws are gives you space to be flawed, and my vulnerabilities give you space to be vulnerable. And sometimes we forget that giving up vulnerability is a gift that you give to somebody.
It is. And I think we really need to redefine what it looks like to have it all together.
100%. Right?
Because I am so tired of that, you know. I'm so tired of these stereotypes of what it looks like to be strong or to have it all together. And I'm just tired of it. We can break down and still have it all together. We can be weak
Yeah.
and still have it all together, you know. And yeah, I'm so glad. I'm glad that you did that, she did that, and I'm hoping we can just together redefine it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's see. How do you deal with a trigger so you don't burst into tears when at work or at a conference? The word cancer is such a trigger.
Oh, for sure. I actually know some people that that's the same thing. I would say, look, if we know that it's really hard to know when someone's going to say a word that will trigger us, but if we know it ahead of time, I like the idea of sort of holding on to something. I like having an anchor item, so it's something that I'll put in my pocket and I'll know that it's there, and I will, you know,
Yeah.
squeeze it, hold on to it, something that will keep me grounded. When in doubt, you excuse yourself and go to the bathroom and release what you have to release, because there's no shame in that, especially at work, you know. We're asking people to put things in a box all day and hold their emotions. And, you know, I even suggest, you know, put it in, you know, go to the bathroom, or if you can find a safe place outside of work,
Yeah.
do that, because work is not always a safe place for people. But, you know, when it comes to a trigger, number one is knowing what our triggers are,
Yeah.
because sometimes they come and we don't know. So it's great that you know. But because it is so unpredictable to whatever people say. I mean, I always say, like, well, if you can avoid the trigger, we avoid the trigger. Like, that's the easiest thing to do. But we can't always avoid the trigger. And so for me, it's, if we know that it's coming, what can I do to ground myself and keep present in the moment? And or if that's not something that works, how can I excuse myself safely until I can go and calm myself down, or text a friend and just not distract myself, but have a sense of just getting recentered again, because it can be really hard. So,
Yeah.
but I love that. I have a little stone in my pocket that I'll bring with me places that I feel like I might be triggered. And, I feel it, it's got little cracks in it, whatever it may be. And I go right there now. My brain has been trained that that's the thing that I do when somebody says something or does something that affects me. And I just call it my anchor item. It anchors me back to myself.
That's awesome. That's something I never considered. That's really great.
It's helpful. Yeah. So, I mean, some of it is. I'm sorry, I can't read any of this.
That's okay. Nicole, one of my community members said, "Thank you. Being strong," in quotes, sometimes leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Some days I'm just a mess, but I put on the happy face and keep going. Yeah.
It's hard, and I think that's part of it, is that self-care, right? When we look better, we feel better. But I mean, the happy face shouldn't be all day long. It should also be that you have a safe place to fall the F apart, because we need more of that more often than we do just putting our happy face on and going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, to your point, it's that constant redefining of what strength looks like. And, when I was younger, I thought strength was just, I got it. I'm good. Thanks for asking, but I'm good. I'll get through it. I can manage. I'm okay. And now I recognize that strength is being able to say when I'm not. And that's been the biggest lesson I think that I've learned, especially in the last years or so, is just true strength comes from being able to be really vulnerable and say, you know what, I feel like dog shit today. And I laid down on my couch and I cried for 4 hours, and I'm not even sure why, but I just did. And, there are those things that the vulnerability is the courage piece, and the vulnerability is the strength piece, and showing people those vulnerabilities really elevates your true strength. We're gonna, like, we're human beings. We're gonna have those moments that just wreck us. And I love that analogy about how grief comes in waves. Like in the beginning, it's like these waves are just pounding you down and you just can't even come up for air. And then over time, it's like, oh, out of the blue, you'll just get hit with one. But eventually it doesn't feel like like a tidal wave, and it's more of just a little here and there. But the vulnerability piece, it just, everything comes back to that.
It's true. And the people that don't appreciate your vulnerability in your life, if they're not safe, I mean, if you're going to do it to kind of a broader public, the people who don't appreciate that or cringe at that are not your people. But it also shows that they are not able to be there too, and they're not able to meet their own vulnerability where it is.
Yeah.
I live by this quote that people can only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves.
Ooh.
And it's something that I think about anytime somebody is really disappointing me or not able to show up in grief or any kind of hardship, is that, okay, I know now that they're not able to meet themselves there either. And not that it gives an excuse for behavior that people can't show up and be better, but it also is, people have limitations, real limitations that we don't always have the ability to see from the outside. And so empathy goes a long way too. But, having that permission to just be messy is where it's at. And I'm so glad that the world, like, we know more than we did before. When you and I were growing up, we didn't, that was the way life was. You just kept it moving.
Yeah.
We didn't have time to like sit and cry about things. We had things to do, and like we had to keep showing up. And now, where mental health and, is something that is kind of getting more attention, it gives us permission. Trauma is a buzzword now. Years and before September 11th, you never heard the word trauma if it wasn't associated with the Vietnam War or war syndrome. Now everybody's traumatized. And, but it's, what I appreciate about it, even though it's overkill sometimes, is that it brings these things and these issues and our humanity and our hardships within humanity to the forefront. And we can actually be human with each other and work on the things that have wounded us. And that to me is like, all right, if this is the buzzword of the year, let's take it, because it means that more people will get help and more people can show up as themselves and more people can feel seen and heard and witnessed in the world. And that will make a healthier world over time anyway.
Yeah.
So right now I feel like humanity is in a very messy period. very, very messy.
Yeah.
But the positive part is that we're bringing things to the surface to be healed. And I think that's one of the more hopeful things about all of this in this time for all of us individually too.
Yeah. Someone asked, when someone says they're not okay, people often don't know how to respond. Can you advise? I often reach out for a hand, squeeze it, like, you know, when someone says they're not okay. I think this is all part of, right, building the empathy.
Yeah, I mean, I think squeezing their hand is great. I also like the idea of coming to somebody who says that and saying, okay, would you like me to listen, or would you like me to help find a solution with you? And, you know, giving somebody the option to say, you know, I'm not okay. I just want, but it's great if you can listen to me. I don't need any help. But I have to vent, you know. And then there are times that people don't know what to do. And the idea that somebody would sit with them or talk with them and help them find a solution is really great, you know. But we don't want to ever push a solution on people, because that is not healing and that is not helpful. Right. So I like to give people the option, if they say something as, you know, vague as I'm not okay, you know, this is how I can show up for you. And obviously squeezing a hand is always nice. I would like someone to squeeze my hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And those are the things that someone else said that too. I like the hand squeeze. You know, I think that there is that, those are little moments to build the empathy muscle, because I think that's where we go wrong, is if we don't know what to do and then we do nothing.
Yeah.
And I experienced that with someone in my life who really struggled with empathy. And it was so infuriating, as someone who needed them to show up for me, to feel like they were kind of like, I don't know what to do here. So I'm gonna and it was like, I'm in pain and I need you, and you're not showing up for me. And so there's that piece of the discomfort. You know, you don't get jacked at the gym without discomfort. I mean, it's the same thing with empathy. You're going to have to get uncomfortable with building that muscle. Like, I'm going to face situations where I don't know exactly what to do, and then I do something and I learn that was helpful to that person. You know, those are the
Oh yeah. I mean, look, we're in such a good vibes only culture sometimes that people just don't, they don't have the capacity to even reach it within themselves. But, you know, I imagine every person listening right here would be, you know, could think of one person in their life that when they had a very hard thing happen or a really devastating event, that person couldn't show up for them, or that they've lost people in their life because people just do not have the ability to show up either in the way that we need them to, or at all. And, you know, that to me is probably one of the more painful losses within a loss. And, you know, but I think it's so brave for you to say, I need you to show up for me. Whereas, you know, if it were me personally, I would just sort of sit back and not, you know, not feel like they loved me anymore, and, you know, not ask for anything. But I do think that the way that you say that is like giving people the permission to continue staying connected to you. Like, you know, I may not know what I need, but whatever you're doing isn't it. So maybe just show up as you. You know,
try another one, pull another card.
Kind of, you know, like that idea that I gave with the 3 options. Like, you know, the problem is with this, and I'm making light of it, but, you know, we don't want to have to give people ideas on how to help us. But if the connection to us is so important and we want to keep that connection, and they aren't showing up out of, you know, not loving us or being selfish or whatever else may feel like malintent, then it is really brave of us to say, okay, you're super unhelpful, and this would be a better option for me. Just come over and hang out or something like that, you know. But, you know, it's clumsy, you know. So it's interesting because we have 2 different ways you and I would relate to the person not showing up. And I think that both of those could be really common. But either way, our needs are not being met. And so it's interesting to see what that outcome could be. But at the end of the day, we have to learn, each of us, to do better for people who are hurting. And I like the idea sometimes of, you know, I love the squeezed hand. I don't know who said that, but thank you. Because it is, you know, that touch that, you know, when we're in pain, you know, we feel stiff and whatever, and having that wordlessness, but the affection within that is really powerful, you know. But also saying, you know, I don't know, you know, if you want to talk or you want a solution, or would you like me to show up and just be here with you? Because both of those I can do and want to do. We need to do more of that more often for almost every area of life, for people, because we're all struggling, whether
Yeah.
it's a loss or whether it's a really challenging week or whether it's, you know, traumas. And I mean, everyone's going through something. We're going through something collectively, we're going through something individually. So it's how do we show up and do better for each other? And sometimes it's the little things.
Yeah.
So, and if this live can just bring more awareness to that, then amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy we did this.
Same. It's okay to
You
not.
know, it's more than okay. It's more than okay. And it's more than okay to say that you're not okay.
Yes. So your book launches what day?
Oh my goodness. Next Tuesday. I have it here. It looks like this. It's so funny because I haven't gotten used to advertising it yet because I'm really shit at advertising myself. But I feel proud of this only because it's really written with the intent to help people through a major loss or a fresh loss of any kind that leaves people feeling so disoriented and alone and not really sure of the answer to the question, kind of, you know, what's next, now what? And so, you know, I like having tangible help. I like tools in almost every situation if I can have it. And that gives a sense of agency and control over something that feels so unpredictable. And so many of us are in unpredictable places. So yeah, so it comes out Tuesday. I am so nutty. I am excited and nervous and all of the things. And yeah, just hoping for the best with it. So
is it available in the UK too? Someone's asking.
It is, absolutely. It will be out in the UK with eBerry Books. If you know that, it'll be everywhere, Waterstones, Amazon, all of that, on Tuesday as well. The thing I have in the UK is not hardback though, it's paperback. I wanted something a little bit easier. But yes, it will be there too.
And listen, everybody, go pre-order the book. Pre-order numbers are super important. Gina won't say it, but I know this from friends who have launched things. The pre-order numbers are super important. So if you're thinking about buying the book, pre-order it because that just helps all of the things. I have linked it in my stories right now.
Oh, thank you.
There's a link to go get it on Amazon right now. And if you watch this later and that link is no longer in my stories, look for the Amazon bubble at the top of my Instagram and my Amazon store. And it's under favorite books. And you can also get your copy there. I'm really proud of you, friend, but I think that it's going to be very helpful. And I feel like this is a book not only for someone who's going through grief, but this is also a book that you give to someone who is going through grief, you know. And so this might not be a book that you feel like you need right now, but you may have someone in your life that could use it. And I think you're getting just a glimpse of what Gina can make you feel about all of this, because this is how I have felt, you know, having you as my friend and my sounding board to kind of process some of this stuff has been really powerful for me. And so I want to thank you for that. You are definitely a light. You have helped me so much through what was a very painful and unexpected time in my life. And I just want to say thanks for that, because
I'm going to cry. I'm a sap.
Same. And, you know, the lovely thing about Gina and I is that Gina and I have never met in person. And Gina showed up in a way for me that was so genuine, because I had reached out to her and said, hey, I think I might need professional help, and can I get virtual appointments with you? And she was like, how about we just talk as friends and we don't call it an appointment? And it was one of those things that I will never forget. It has changed the trajectory of our friendship. I am so grateful for you as a friend. I'm so honored that I know you as a human, and I'm thrilled for you. I'm excited that your voice and your perspective on this very, very all-consuming topic is going to be put out in the universe next week. And congratulations, my friend. And I appreciate you so much, and I love you to death.
I love you to death. Oh my God, thank you so much. Thank you for having me with your people, because I see the way that you show up and shine, and oh my God, I just want to squeeze you, because, you know, it's so hard these days to find real people, you know, people who show up in all of the messiness, and the people you can see just their soul come through. And, you know, you are so much to so many people, and now a piece of my heart that is there for good. And here I was thinking that you and I got close when I said I'll cut a bitch. So
well, that's what started. I was like, who is this broad? She
this is
feisty,
years ago.
and I love me some feisty. And then I realized you're also like a doll and a sweetheart
Oh.
and a loving human being. But you had me at I'll cut a bit.
I mean,
so
this is the start of our friendship. Everybody should know. So if you too need a bitch cut,
I got
please
these coaster.
find me.
I got this coaster. It says I have two moods: namaste and I'll cut you.
This is why we're friends. This is why we're friends. I love it. I love it. So no, thank you so much. I have to jump into
book.
Thank you so much, everyone. And if you want to follow me or just keep in touch and, you know, send me an email or go to my website, ginamoffa.com, and just tell me if you have any questions. This is not just a live, but my hope is to, ooh, I see that earring. But my hope is to have a sense that you also can have an adjunct community for when things feel hard. So please consider me somebody that you can reach out to, whether on Instagram or via email. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And Jen, I adore you, cherish you, treasure you, and thank you for all you do.
I got you, friend. I'm going to be celebrating you next week. We're going to have a virtual cocktail.
We must, please.
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise. Thank you. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, love.